Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Woo Curious podcast. Your map to the mystical, your key to the sacred, and your guide back home to yourself. I'm Eileen, a writer, a spiritual coach, energy healer, and slow living witch. This podcast is your invitation to explore a world where the mundane and the sacred intertwine. It's a haven for those ready to take the first steps into the realms of magic and mystery, providing a safe space for you to embark on your own enchanted journey towards healing and self-discovery. Here, I'll unveil the whispers of the mystical, the rituals often hidden in plain sight, and I'll engage in sacred conversation intended to stir your soul and lead you back into your power. I'm all about demystifying woo and witchcraft. So, whether you're a seasoned seeker or simply woo curious, I'm so delighted you've decided to join me on this journey. Let's make magic. Hey Woo Crew, before we drop into today's episode, I just want to remind you one more time about Shine, a guided journey to step into your authenticity. If you're listening to this on Monday when this episode airs, we get started today. Never fear, if you've missed the first day or even if you've missed the whole week, you can still sign up and catch the replays. This is a transformative journey experience, learning how to reconnect with the authentic you who is beneath the masks, the roles that society has told you to play. It helps you connect to your inner trust, your intuition, your inner power and worth, and your inner desires. So often we are disconnected from who we truly are and what we really want, and it can be hard to access those things beneath all the layers of conditioning. This week is designed to help you shed those layers, come home to yourself, and find that authentic, shiny, beautiful soul that lives within all of the layers society has thrust upon you. The link to sign up will be below in the show notes as always. I hope to see you there. Hello, Woo Crew, and welcome back to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I am your host, Eileen, and I'm here today with a guest, Emily Jane Saroff. Am I saying that last name right?
Yeah, that's pretty much correct.
Okay, awesome. Emily Jane is the brand artist and face behind Empower with M. She's a graduate of architectural design, a Jay Shetty certified life coach, business mentor, social media figure, and host of the Empower with M podcast. As a six-figure business owner, she is redefining what it means to build a brand by merging creative branding with strategic marketing, helping clients find their voice through impactful brand design and teaching them how to communicate it effectively. In a world where branding and marketing are often seen as separate domains, Emily Jane bridges that gap, emphasizing that true brand design is psychology, not just a mood board. It's about creating genuine connections and unforgettable experiences with your audience. Through her unique methodology, Emily Jane empowers business owners to integrate brand design with marketing psychology, creating magnetic brands that captivate and convert. Thank you so much for being here with me today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited for this conversation.
Me too. And she got up early at 8 a.m. to be here with us today, Woo Crew. So a sign of dedication. We're on very opposite sides of the world. So as I mentioned before we jumped on, I always love to start these conversations off talking a little bit about your journey with spirituality, because I am a late in life spiritual path discoverer. That's a really eloquent way of saying that. And I'm also curious if it's something that's always been a part of your life or something you've discovered more recently. And then, of course, if and how it informs the work that you do.
Yeah, I love this. Well, for me, it's always been there, but I hadn't always been fully aware of it. I definitely didn't grow up in a family that was highly religious or highly spiritual. Like, I'm really the spiritual person in my family that has all the woo-woo beliefs. But when I was in high school, I would say that's where I first started to really feel into the first glimpse of my spirituality coming through. And that was largely through my art. And so for me, my art is like the core of my spiritual practices. That for me is what I truly believe and have always believed. has been a spiritual gift of mine. And as I've progressed through the last 10 years of my life, I've really been able to see just how much of a spiritual connection there is to the art that I create. So when I was in high school, I first started to discover my unique artistic style during like year 11 and year 12 art class. And that's where I first started to see like the spiritual side of me really come through, where I'm like expressing myself in ways that to others might come across quite weird or different or creepy or eerie. And then it was when I turned 22 years old that I feel like I had my very first major spiritual awakening. So at that time, I was studying my Masters of Architecture. I was also working a job in the architecture industry. And I remember just feeling this intense emotional turmoil at that point. You know, it was like my head was saying, stay on this path that you've worked so hard for. And my heart was pulling me in a different direction. And so this was when I had what I believe was, you know, the first clearest encounter with my spirituality in the sense of a spirit guide. And so I had this, and in that dream, a massive crow flew down to me, like wings the span of arms, like put wide open. And this crow flew down, landed on my arm, and looked me in the eyes. And then it just felt this familiarity, like this deep sense of knowing of like, we're familiar with each other. I know you, like, you're here to serve me. And I remember waking from that dream, and my boyfriend broke up with me. I quit my degree, and I also quit my job. So three major things happened following that dream. And that's when I started to then take that dream and turn it into a piece of art, because there was this massive happening in my life. And for me, like when big shifts or big emotions come through, the best way for me to really ground myself through that is through my art. And so if you've gone onto my socials, or if any of our listeners jump onto my Instagram at Empower with Em, you'll come across this big drawing that I did, which features the crow in the center of it. And that became like a 3-year journey for me to actually complete that artwork. As once I stepped into the business space, I found myself shifting away from that part myself, that spiritual part of myself, that part of myself that loves to create art. And so really the last few years of business for me has been this journey of coming back home and seeing how can I no longer deny myself expressing myself and my spirituality through my art, but how can I actually integrate this as a part of what it is I do within my business, so that I'm not separating the two parts of myself, the part of myself that wants to serve through business, but then also the part of myself that needs to serve myself through my art as well. And so that's what's really brought me to where I am today. I just had my 27th birthday back in March this year. And it's interesting because that was definitely the next major spiritual awakening that was notable for me, where it was just, my heart was just screaming at me saying, you have to create, you have to create. And that was really the moment where I stopped denying myself creating and expressing my art, and just made that full decision to just redefine the way that I want to move through life and move through business, so that I can fully be embracing that part of myself as well.
I love the story. It almost sounds like the first awakening got you out of one space, right? The architecture space, this like, oh no, that's not right for me. And yet I think there's something really resonant, or something that is really relatable in that idea of like, oh, I had this awakening, this awareness, I got to get out of that. But then to dive 2 feet into business and creating a business, and still kind of operating in that space of, in a lot of regards, like that masculine energy, that do, produce, be, like follow the rules. There's people telling you all over. It's very loud in the business sphere, you know, how things are done or how to do them. And so even though it was that initial encounter that pushed you out of the path you were on into this new path, it took another kind of big moment or awareness or awakening to then allow you to say, oh, and then how do I do this my way, and that honors me as well as the business itself?
Yeah, it's definitely been a massive journey of redefining success for myself, particularly this year. And really understanding and recognizing where in the past maybe the kinds of success I was chasing was very much driven by certain wounds that I had, whether that be self esteem wounds or something else. And yeah, really coming to a point where I recognized that the feelings I were feeling towards business, the lack of joy, the lack of fulfillment, was of my own cause because I had been prioritizing growing in a way that wasn't true to how I actually wanted to be growing. And yes, there was success that I was building, but it wasn't the kind of success that I ultimately saw for myself in the big picture. And so, yeah, I really gave myself permission to redefine what success could look like, ask myself, what if? What if I stopped waiting until I have the 7-figure business before I start creating art? And what if I actually started to reintegrate that very part of myself that shines or wants to shine the brightest because it comes the most natural to me? What if I could start integrating that into my plan to creating the life and the success that I want to create?
We did an episode on success and redefining success. I think just a couple of weeks ago, I recorded that one. And so I'm really curious because that is a topic that comes up a lot especially for women in the entrepreneurial space, I think. But in general, in life, we've gone through life being told what success looks like for a lot of us, especially in Western cultures, the house, the kids, 2.5 kids, the dog, the picket fence. And even though that's kind of an antiquated idea, it's still there. The 6 figures, the Hawaiian vacations, the first class flights, and all of those things that, yeah, they're nice, but what does success really look and feel like, especially in the day-to-day? And so I'm curious if you're willing to share a little bit about what that redefinition is for you.
Yeah. So the biggest thing that was like the change for me was I stopped comparing myself to my friends who were succeeding. I actually muted a lot of my friends who are really like growing rapidly in business because I found myself constantly looking at what they were doing and then allowing my definition of success to be guided by that. And so that was the first step I took because then that allowed me space to actually connect with myself without having the external noise. And in doing that, the loudest thing that came through for me was that my definition of success really looks like me being able to have my dream property, my dream home, have the horses, the animals, and being able to spend my days painting whenever I want. So having a business that affords me the luxuries that I desire on a material level, but also the spaciousness that I desire on a day-to-day level, to have the slow mornings and to be deeply in my creative and whilst still being able to serve my clients. And so for me, that's what success looks like. It's being able to actually integrate my art into my weekdays, not just my weekends. And that's one thing that I am doing for myself right now, because again, that success, I can step into it in this moment. I don't need to wait until I have the 7 figures to feel that level of success that I'm creating for myself. And so that's why, like, when you look through my content on my socials, you'll see so much of me sitting in my flower garden and painting and just creating space to be creative. And that is what success looks like, is having that space to actually be creating instead of, trading that part of myself for something else.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's something that's very common for so many people that I speak to, is that desire for more space, for more time, for more ability to tend to ourselves and not just constantly be having to be productive, quote unquote, in the sense of creating or producing income or product or goods or services, or constantly giving out of ourselves and depleting ourselves that way. And so when you are working with people, I know that helping them identify their own creativity is a big part of what you do. How do you help them find that spaciousness or that ease for themselves as well?
That's a great question. And a lot of clients actually come to me and they are either deeply in their masculine or they're deeply in their feminine, and they don't really have a solid balance. And the answer to that question is in creating the balance. You create that spaciousness for yourself in your business in learning how to balance the masculine structure with the feminine flow. And that as well has been a journey for me for years. You know, when I first started my I was hyper masculine driven. You know, like I was working 7 days a week and pulling like 10-hour days, hustling hard on my business, sacrificing all my values. And then the pendulum swung massively to the other side after I burnt myself out and I didn't have the capacity to show up in that way. And then I fell deeper into my feminine, and then the pendulum swung again. And so it's about going through this pendulum swing until you find that middle point of having a balance with the masculine structure that can then hold that spaciousness for you to then flow and be in your feminine, whether that be to create, whether that be to spend time with loved ones, whether that be to sit out in nature, whatever that looks like for you. You need to create that balance, because if you don't have the masculine that's grounded and structured, then you're not going to have the business, which means you're then not going to have the space to actually flow and create and do those feminine centered things that you're really craving doing.
Yeah, I think you're speaking the journey of so many of us, and I'm seeing it in all the big spaces right now, like all the big kind of big names, as it were, in the coaching and entrepreneurial industry, of these women who were really successful and who are like, oh, we need to slow the fuck down because we're burning ourselves out and not prioritizing what's important. But there has to be the balance, because we can't just do nothing, or nothing will grow and flourish. A garden takes work, but it also takes that patience and tending and that gentle space holding, almost, as it were, for our businesses and ourselves and our literal gardens. I'm curious because I know that a lot of people, especially those who've been pushing and in their masculine and doing the work and striving and they've created the structures and they're just go, go, go. A lot of those people do tend to struggle to connect with their creativity, because the slowing down, it feels hard to do. Often it feels a bit scary. It feels unnerving, like everything's going to come crumbling down if we take our foot off the gas. But then also because many of us have been disconnected from it for so long, and it's been disincentivized as something to develop because, well, like art's not going to pay the bills. So I'm curious how you help people begin to reconnect with and strengthen that part of themselves, because it exists in all of us.
Yeah, it does. And I always like to say that your creativity is a muscle and it just needs to be exercised the same way that any other muscle needs to be exercised in order to function properly. So for those who are like really stuck in their masculine, maybe you're just deep into your business all the time, or maybe, you know, you're juggling a lot of things. You might be working a 9 to 5 still whilst trying to build a business, whilst trying to also, you know, raise your children. And so what I like to tell you to focus on first and foremost is actually creating intentional space to be shifting out of the masculine, so that then you can have space to sit in your feminine and sit in your creative and start to play and express yourself in that area. Because if you're stuck in your masculine, doing in your business, in your job, whatever it may be, and then you're trying to sit down and create, you're not in that kind of mindset and that mentality to actually be able to support that activity that you want to be doing, right? So that's why, like, if I want to go and paint a picture, I can't really go paint a picture whilst my mind is like stuck in mapping out my finances and tracking my budget and this and that, because it's two different states of minds. So the simplest way that I help my clients start to tap deeper into their creativity is in creating those little transition windows. So actually scheduling time to be creative, so that then you can plan structure and you can prepare for when you then jump into that space. So that might be as simple as, you know, let's say you're going to do your business work from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. And then from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m., you're going to give yourself a little transition window where you're not going to be on the computer. You're not going to be doing any masculine tasks. Maybe you're going to listen to some music or sit in the garden or move your body before you then sit down and start to create, whether that be create content or create artwork or however else you want to express yourself creatively. You're just going to create a small window of time. It doesn't have to be an hour. It could be 5 minutes. It could be 10 minutes, a small window of time to create that transition so that then you can be fully in the energy that you need to be in order to start creating.
I love that idea too. And I love that you suggest including some space shift, because it's tricky to move from one mode to the next, and it's almost like you're giving your body the time to unwind from one way of being, and to have that embodiment of the space of, okay, now I'm shifting what my brain is doing, what my body is doing, what I'm accessing, with the permission. And I think that's the really important part when we schedule things into our calendars, is creating that permission to do the thing that is more frivolous seeming often when we're stuck in that mode, or less useful. I hate the way that we've gotten ourselves into a place as a society that so many of the things that really do not only bring us joy, but bring us expansion, not only personally, but within our businesses, end up relegated to the realm of, I'll do that later if I have time or when I have time. And it's so important to make that space. And time blocking is such a powerful way to do it.
Exactly that. Again, it comes back to that structure, right? Like that masculine structure supports the feminine flow. And there's a really perfect example of this that one of my friends has said quite often. And it's the question of, is a river feminine or masculine? And most people would say, oh, well, a river is feminine because it flows. But the river only flows because it's got the masculine structure of the riverbed around it. And so for our listeners who are quite visual people, like that really landed for me. So if you're wanting to allow yourself to be more in that creative flow, then what is that masculine structure that you need to create for yourself to actually be able to hold, the flowing of your creative water?
Yeah, I love that metaphor. I've heard it before, and I'm so glad you reminded me of it today, because it's a very useful one, especially for those of us who are maybe pushing back a little bit against the masculine programming that's been running so strongly. It's easy to end up as a lake instead of a river, and that's okay too. And when we're trying to grow something and build towards something, we do need that structure and that momentum, the forward momentum, but it can be gentle and easy when we have the right structures in place. I love that. My brain keeps coming back to this image of the crow that you had as part of your kind of beginning awakening. And I'm really curious how that messenger shows up as part of or in your business now, or if it does. I suspect there's a tie there for you because of the fact that it has that presence in your social media. But yeah, I wanted to circle us back around to that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I've thought about this myself over the years. When I was 22 and I had that experience, first it was in the dream, then following the dream on one of the days when I went to work. And it was actually the day that I planned to resign from my office job. I remember feeling so nervous driving there, and I put my hand on the door handle to go inside. And when I put my hand on the door handle, a crow flew down and landed on the fence right next to me. And that was like, again, that encounter that was like just this knowingness. And so for probably that whole first year, I think the crow was like very present for me. And so whenever I'd see the crow out in like, the garden or sitting on a fence, I'd take that as little reminders that you're on the right path, keep going, continue as you are. Then as time progressed, it kind of shifted in ways. So I ended up getting a tattoo on my back after, I think it was right after that relationship ended, or maybe a year after that, something like that, which then became a little constant reminder for me of like, okay, this was a big piece in my journey. Whenever I need to remember this, like it's there. I can always just like look in the mirror and feel that groundingness and that connection to that guide in that moment. But right now, I would say specifically, it continues to be present for me in simply viewing and admiring that piece of artwork that I created. I've got the big original sketch actually hanging on the wall in our house. So as soon as you walk into the house, you see the crow, and any room that you need to walk into, you have to walk past the crow. And so for me, it's like always present just in the form of my artwork. And that's something that, again, like I'm sharing more and more of on my socials. So again, it's coming through a lot heavier now, where it's like I'm telling the story behind the crow and telling it through different capacities. And it was only yesterday, actually, I made a post because a memory popped up. It was 2 years yesterday since I completed that. So I find that through my artwork, the symbol of the crow continues to resurface in small and gentle reminders. But right now, like the biggest anchoring into my spirituality really just is the simple act of creating artwork. And so I'm making every single month, I'm creating 1 to 2 new paintings that spiritual expressions of something that feels really alive for me in this moment.
That's beautiful, for sure. I'm always so curious, especially when it's animals that show up as our guides, our messengers, and crows. All the corbeal families, all like crows, ravens, those birds are very wise and carry a lot of knowledge. They're often go-betweens between our realm and the spiritual realm. And so it's always interesting to see how that weaves through, and the messages, the spiritual meaning behind the animals too. As they lend themselves. And crows like shiny things. And so there's this sense of like, art isn't necessarily shiny, but there is like a beauty to it, right? And for that draw to the beautiful and placing importance on it and including it as part of your business. And it's a really beautiful example of how feeding ourselves and caring for ourselves and giving ourselves the, again, permission to do those practices that really fill us up and light us up can support the business. Do you feel like you've felt a shift in not success by the other standard terms, but do you feel like there's been a shift in the way that business really feels for you since you've been giving yourself that?
Yeah, massively. I even remember, so I was journaling. I bought a new journal start of this year, just because, like a fresh journal for a new year feels really like me. Yeah. And I intentionally purchased a journal that was like a creative and inspiration journal. So like, in different pages, there's artworks by other people and there's little quotes down the bottom that connect back to creativity and art. And I bought that because start this year, I felt that pull to start to really just lean in more. And I remember for the first couple months of the year before I had that big awakening in March, like every day I was journaling in that journal, just saying, I feel so flat. I don't want to do work. I just want to lay in bed. I just want to sleep. I just don't feel drive. I feel unhappy. And once I actually lent into creating again and made it a consistent part of my routine, that completely shifted in what I was journaling each day. I started journaling saying, I feel inspired. I feel like I've got purpose again. I feel like I can see the big picture. I know where I'm going. I have the vision. And like there was that incredible shift in my journal itself that I can look back and see the before and the after of the painting. But not just that. There was so much feedback that I received from people on social media, from my clients, from new clients who were coming forward. And the feedback I was receiving is that, like, people that have followed me and watched me for years, they were saying, I see you fully for the first time. Like, I finally, fully see you. I get you. And making comments such as, I've never seen someone lead in their business in the way that you're leading in your business with your art and how that's inspiring them. So there was those signs that I saw myself, but then there was also feedback that I started to receive from people after making that shift to just really solidify for me that, okay, there is a difference in the way that I feel and show up for business with or without my art.
And that it's obvious not just in your own body and your own energy, but to everybody around you.
Everyone else. And it's so interesting because for so long I always looked outside of myself like, I need to find that thing, you know? I would look at other people who would do successful in the online space and I'd go, it seems like they just find their thing and then all of a sudden everything clicks into place for them and success becomes so easy, they become magnetic and la da 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 da. And so I was always on this quest of trying to find my thing outside of myself. Yet all along, like my thing was screaming right in front of my face and within me the entire time, but I wouldn't allow myself to see it or embrace it because it looked different to maybe what I was seeing in people around me. And so I guess what I wanted to share there is just a little reminder to anyone who can resonate with that, can resonate with this feeling of constantly seeking something outside of themselves. Take a moment to pause and go within. And I can guarantee that the answer that you're looking for is probably right in front of your face. For me, it would literally scream at me. There would be this voice inside my head that would literally say, create more art, create more art. And what would I do? I would not create more art. And then one day, the universe smacked me like a brick wall and gave me no other choice but to actually create more art. And that was the moment where I realized it. So you can wait until you are literally forced into leaning into the thing you've been avoiding, or you can just lean in now and save yourself some of that pain that comes with that brick wall.
Yeah. And isn't that always the way? That the truth we seek, the wisdom we seek, it is almost always inside of us. And we've been conditioned to look outside of ourselves for our whole lives because that's what keeps us disempowered and malleable and controllable. And especially as women, right? Seeking that external approval, validation, to fit in, to look like, have it look like what it looks like for others. A lot of us really struggle to hear that voice, even when it is yelling. And so I love that what you do, even though it's not explicitly, woo to tap into your intuition, in a lot of ways it is, because our creativity, like the creative side of our brain, is also really much more closely linked with that subconscious side of our brain, right? It's that outlet for the deeper wisdom that lives inside of us.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. And so in terms of like, you are a branding and marketing mentor, creator, you help people with branding and marketing. Tell me a little bit about what it is that you actually do with and for people.
Yeah, so I like to call myself the brand artist, and ultimately what that involves is helping paint a brand that is a true expression of your unique essence and helping you learn how to actually communicate that and bring that to life through your content, through your marketing, through everything that you're putting out there into the world. And so there's two main levels in which I help my clients with this on. The first level is the new business owner who's not yet making six figures. Where I tend to serve them is in helping them build out the full foundations to their business, whilst also building out a very clear and strong brand identity so that they have everything that they need to actually start selling high ticket and building their way towards that six-figure mark. And then the second level that I work with clients is for the business owners who are already doing six, multi-six, or even seven figures. And essentially I work with them on a more high-end luxury level, facilitating luxury branding VIP experiences for them, where, if they live within Australia, I travel to them. Otherwise, we do it virtually, and essentially it becomes a creative brainstorming experience where I help these visionaries really extract that next level of their brand and strategize the way that they're ultimately going to integrate it. So some of my clients have described me as the integrator of both the creative side and the strategic side, where I can help with the creative brainstorming and painting that creative vision, but then also building out a tangible, actionable plan for them to integrate that strategy.
Like the best of both worlds. It's rare to find both. I feel like often you get the one and not the other when it comes to any kind of offers in the business world. It's either all feminine flow or all structure and masculine. And so it's lovely to have both coming together. It sounds really lovely, that the different offers that you have. I always love a good VIP offer. It's so luxurious to be able to indulge in that when we're at that point.
I enjoy them because I love the in-person connection for those in
Mm-hmm.
and essentially, like, I travel to the home of these experts and facilitate the experience for them there, which is really beautiful for them because they get to be creating in their environment and in the comfort of that environment as well. So yeah, it's definitely a fun experience to be able to facilitate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how cool to be able to do, for sure. I love that. And we're going to have all the links for how to connect with you, how to work with you in the show notes below. But do you want to just tell listeners, for the people who are, driving and not going to click on the show notes right away, but want to maybe connect with you?
The easiest way to find me is on Instagram. That is where I am the most active. So that's at Empower with M. Or if you would like, you can go and listen to my podcast, which is the Empower with M podcast. And that has been around since before I started my business. So you can connect back with 22-year-old me at the start of her journey, when she first had that dream of the crow, and listen to how everything's evolved over the years. But yeah, the best way to get in touch is Instagram. So send me a message if you are curious about working with me.
Awesome. That's so great. That's where I hang out as well. So my listeners are familiar with being redirected over there. Anything else that you want to share? Any last words of wisdom or anything that's coming to mind before we wrap up?
The final thing that I would share is to just trust yourself. For so many years, like I would say for the last 10 years, there have been so many points between finishing high school and getting to where I am now in business where that little nudge of leaning deeper into my art has continued to come through. But for whatever reasons, I didn't give myself full permission to trust that nudge and lean into it fully and to follow it. And so, whatever that nudge is that you're feeling, give yourself permission to actually listen to it, to get curious about it, to explore it, and trust in where your inner wisdom is guiding you.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Beautiful advice, and something that we can all take to heart in the areas of our life where we're feeling that creative nudge or urge to do something that maybe doesn't make sense on the surface, but there's a reason it's there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being my guest today. Do you prefer Emily Jane or just M?
Either or. I feel like officially I like the Emily Jane, but then once we're past the officials, I'm all about M.
Okay. All right. Well, then I'm going to say thank you, Em, because that feels easier. I'm more familiar. So thank you so much for being my guest today. And I look forward to staying connected. For all of my listeners, make sure you go connect with her over on Instagram, Empower with M. All the links will be below in the show notes. And as always, if you liked this episode, please go ahead and leave a rating, a review. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. It helps ever so much, and share it with your friends. And I will see you here this time next week. Bye for now.